everybody. Today's episode is going to be an interview I conducted with my friend Joseph Beard, better known as Joe Beard. So Joe, he is the host of another podcast dealing with HBCU bands. It is called The Marching Podcast. It's a great podcast. I actually, once upon a time, was a panelist on that podcast. It's kind of like a sports center show, but it's dealing with bands, HBCU bands only. And so he is so used to being the one interviewing people, I thought I would turn the tables on him and interview him to find out more about him, where he got started. He also marched into HBCU bands, and so how he got from where he was to creating the Marching Podcast. So let's go ahead and listen to my interview with Joe Beard. Okay, I am really excited about today's podcast because I have a very dear friend with me today. His name is Joseph Beard. He is the founder of the Marching Podcast, which I have been a guest on. I was actually a panelist a year or so ago, a regular panelist. And I'm just really excited to have him on the podcast so I can talk to him about his experiences. He marched at Johnson C. Smith. He marched at Jackson State. But I'll let him talk a little bit more about that. So how you doing, Joe?
I'm doing well. I'm honored. Thanks for having me. How are you doing?
I'm good. So I want to start off by asking you, tell me about, your hometown. Where did you grow up? And, when was do you remember your first time seeing an HBCU band? Just talk to me a little bit about that.
Okay, so I'm from St. Louis, Missouri, and my father is from Jackson. And my mother is from Charlotte, North Carolina. And what happened was my dad finished Jackson State. He marched in the band, and he finished Jackson State in 1966 and then moved to St. Louis to get his master's at Washington University. My mother finished Spelman in 1971, and then she moved to St. Louis to attend Washington University to get her master's degree. My dad stayed in St. Louis after Washington University and then got his PhD at St. Louis University, and then he met my mom. And then long story short, I could tell that, two HBCU grads in a different city from their hometown, from their education, they had me. And that's essentially everything my life is about now. It was really important for my parents because they had good jobs. They had, we were in a really nice neighborhood, but they felt that it was really important for me to be around black people and not be in a low economic area of black people, but they wanted to put me in anything that involved, intelligent black people. So my mother was active with Spelman College alumni in the St. Louis area. My dad was active with the Jackson State Alumni Association in that area. So my dad's an alpha, and my mother, she kind of held on basically to Spelman because they didn't have sororities when she was there on the campus. But essentially everywhere I went, I was in Jack and Jill. I was in some type of upward bound program, something where it was a whole bunch of educated black folks together. And then I would meet my friends, and then they would connect with other HBCU graduates in the area and stuff. And so that was how they raised me, just making sure I was surrounded by, good people going somewhere.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the other side of that was the band. So other than, me being in those groups, they wanted to take me to black college games. So in the Midwest, you got Chicago, we had Indianapolis, and then we had Memphis. So between those cities, I saw Jackson State every year. My dad wanted me to make sure that I had the black college experience through the football games. So basically, probably from I was in probably fourth grade, I was trying to play the trumpet and trying to just play everything I saw Jackson State did. And then as you know, BET started showing the games.
Right.
And so then once that happened, I do too. So I used to just videotape the games, and then I would throughout the week march in front of my TV and half play and like do all of that stuff like in my house.
Right.
So I knew I was going to a black college probably from like 5th or 6th grade, and I knew I was gonna march in the band too.
Right. Okay. So you played the trumpet, and what did your dad play?
My dad played trumpet. I actually played his trumpet. All through up until the 7th grade, my grandmother bought me a new trumpet. But I had 2 trumpets then, so I got to practice with my dad's, and then like if I went out for a competition or something, I had another horn. But then when I went to Smith my first year, and even when I went to Jackson State, I took that horn with me because it was like good luck, and I pulled it out and played it just so I could say that I played my dad's horn when I got to college. You know what I mean? So I still have it and everything. Yeah.
So you were a trumpet player, and how was your high school? Was it corps style? Was it traditional?
It was corps style, but I could tell you in St. Louis, no one really cared about band that much to like know the differences and stuff.
Okay.
There were a couple of bands that it was basically all corps style, but it was nothing serious about bands. It was a very small group of people that was concerned, black or white, about bands. You know what I mean? And it was like probably the parents of people who were in band themselves, you know.
Right.
But yeah, it was corps style, or however you want to call that, yeah.
Right. Okay. So it was, even though you grew up watching the tapes and things of Jackson State, when you actually got to college, it was an adjustment, right? Like you didn't just automatically.
It was.
Yeah.
It was the very first experience I had like that was I went to FAMU's band camp in '95, and that was my first time actually being in a band like that, where I actually like was learning like to dance and to march and to play all at once, because everything before it was just me in my house in front of the VCR doing it. And sometimes even like when I was in high school, I would have like moments in the band room or in practice where I would act like I was like Jackson State, and everybody would be like, hey, what you doing? Like, you know what I'm saying? So I had them little moments, but it wasn't until '95 that I actually was in the experience.
So my question to you is, what made you choose Jackson State? I mean, I know that your dad went there, and you grew up like between, you said, Memphis, Chicago, and Indianapolis. Seeing Jackson State, was that the thing that made you go there?
No, I hated Jackson State, Christy Walker. Like there was no way in the world I was going to Jackson State, and because my dad, he loves him some Jackson State, so he did a good job of showing it to me, but I wanted to have, like, my own path. My mom, because she was from Spelman, and you know that Carolina area, y'all are a little bit, like, more, it's the South, but it's a little bit more, like, East Coast-like. So, so my mom would bring up, with her experience, she would talk about fam more. She would talk about fam. And she would talk about A&T a little bit, but I had 2 parents where it was like my parents both weren't from the SWAC, so I wasn't just all SWAC'd out. Like I had 2 sides of things. Okay. And because my dad and my family went to Jackson State, I figured that I would go somewhere else to like start a tradition in another place, because I was so used to Jackson State. Like I saw them every year and they were good, but I was like, man, I want to do something else. Right. You know what I mean? And then I went to Johnson C. Smith. Well, technically, okay, so I can be real because I am totally at peace about this. I originally picked Hampton. Okay. And I was going to march at Hampton. That was my choice. I got kicked out the pre-college program.
No, are you serious?
Yeah. So brother was smoking weed. No! And yes, and they were not playing, Christy. They was like, if we find a seed in your room, if we don't want any drugs. There was this girl who just went to prison for like moving drugs for this Jamaican dude, and she went to, and it was like the it was the corner story of that year. And they had that story as like, we are zero tolerance. And I honestly, Christy, I had just started really smoking, so I didn't know about like covering up the smell. Like I didn't know anything. I was so green with it, you know.
Oh my gosh!
I got caught.
Yep,
I got caught. Yeah, I got caught, and they kicked me out. My father was actually in Jackson at the time. He got the call, drove to St. Louis to pick up my mother, and then went from St. Louis to Virginia to Hampton to come pick me up. And boy, let me tell you, they picked me up and they didn't say anything to me the whole way back.
Well, yeah.
And I could tell, yeah, and I could tell I heard them because I could tell, like, oh my, are they gonna kill me? Like I was like, oh my God, this is really bad. But I could just see the look in their face. So that from there, I started kind of getting things together as far as maybe thinking before I act, and a lot of those lessons my parents taught me just because I saw how much it hurt them.
Mm-hmm.
And so then I basically had a second chance. I was like, please let me go away to school. I don't want to stay in St. Louis. And I picked Johnson C. Smith because that was like the second school on my list. And my grandmother stayed down the street. So it was somewhat like I have some type of family there, you know. Mm-hmm. And I went there for a year, met the great Duncan C. Gray, had a wonderful experience. But after seeing Jackson State so much, there weren't enough people at the games for me, and we just weren't a big enough program for me. You know what I mean?
So let's hold on. Let's before we go into the Jackson State thing, I want to talk about your experience at Smith. So
okay.
So how was it marching? You marched under Duncan Gray.
Yeah.
Okay. So like, tell me a little bit about like some of the things that you experienced while you were in the band at Smith, and just your overall thoughts on it.
Well, at Smith, we weren't all that. Like we weren't like a huge force to deal with, but the camaraderie between each other across the sections was really good. Like everybody who marched with me that year is still a really close friend, and I still keep up with them. Okay. So it was a really special time at Smith. Like I really love Johnson C. Smith. You know what I mean? It was definitely a family knit thing. We were close, and we were all we had. I mean, it was only like 4 trumpets. Mm-hmm. So we were tight because it was like, man, like, so I had a good experience there. We had a lot of heart, and we had a lot of energy. Mm-hmm. And I remember Mr. Gray would give us these talks, and he would just inspire the hell out of us. He was like, you the greatest, I'm the greatest, and we're going to go out here and show everybody. Like, you know, and we would get crunk. Like, he would lead us in the battle for real. Mm-hmm. And then my most favorite time at Smith was we played South Carolina State. And I talked to Ernest about this, Ernest Stackhouse, because he was there. He was marching that year. And he said, man, we saw y'all on the schedule, and we laughed. He was like, Johnson C. Smith, like, what is that, And, Christy, I think that was the greatest week of practice in Johnson C. Smith history. We were so focused. We were there an hour. Every day we were there an hour early. I mean, it was full energy. We were late at night. I mean, it was the greatest practice ever. And we had a really good performance. What happened was it was the perfect storm because not only did South Carolina State sleep on us, but they didn't have any respect for us to, like, make a new show. So they did the same show the previous week on their home field. Mm-hmm. We went out there, all probably 40 of us. We went out there and we was full energy. And then I remember we was, you remember that song, that Poe Pimp, Do You Wanna Ride? The backbeat. We did that and the breakdown, and the whole stadium, Christy, like, went crazy. Oh, like, wow. Oh my God. Like, so after they did that, and you know how you turn it on when the crowd give you some house. Yeah. Boy, Christy Walker, boy, I'm telling you, that might have been the greatest performance of my life. So we came off the field, and South Carolina State did that show, and the crowd was like, I mean, they barely even clapped. And when they marched off, boy, we was like, we won. We won. And it's like, even to this day, you know, we be letting South Carolina State folks have it. So I remember deep down feeling good, but at the same time, I was like, that they were huge. Like they totally slept on us. And I knew deep down, I was like, if they really wanted to, they could embarrass us. You know what I mean? So that was kind of the experience at Smith. We were small, and I always had in the back of my head my Jackson State experience, but there was so much love there, and I love Mr. Gray so much. It was like, man, I really enjoyed being here until we ran into Dudley High School, and that just wiped out everything. Yeah, Dudley, and RIP to what's the brother's name? That's right, Brian Millsap. He was the director there.
So and I actually marched with him. I marched with him at A&T. So yeah.
No, I did know that. I did know that. So they came into Charlotte, Christy, and they looked just like A&T. I mean, they might as well have been A&T. And they came in and embarrassed us. There was another high school that was it. They embarrassed them. And they were like throwing their arms up at us. They would play something, and they was like, "What's up, Johnson C. Smith?" Well, our trombones were our best section, and they straight up were playing back at the high school. I'll never forget that. I was like, "Oh my God, we're battling with a high school, right?"
Right.
Then my second thought was, we not even part of the battle, because as trumpets, we don't, like, it was just four of us. We didn't know no fanfares, or we didn't know nothing. So I was like, we don't even really have nothing to play back. So that night, it was over. Like, that broke me, and I was like, I think I need to transfer, because I don't want to have that experience like that. And then I found out that I was playing on the wrong mouthpiece. So I didn't have a trumpet person there to, like, make me a better trumpet player.
Right.
So, I just broke down, and I remember I came home that summer. I said, "Dad, I think I want to go to Jackson State. Like, I want to go play in the big time." And my dad was like, "All right, well, I already had everything worked out." My dad had he had took pictures from the season I was at Smith, and he had it in, like, this book for me, and he went through the season with me as if I was still living with him, but I was away, at school. So he had everything archived to show me how the band was in '96, because, he really wanted me to go there. And then once I finally said, "Dad, I'm going to Jackson State," he started to cry, and the rest was history. He was so happy, you know what I mean? And that's how it worked out. I'm really happy that I marched in the boom. It's just how it worked out.
So let me ask you this. What was your major? Like, did you keep your major? Did you switch when you transferred schools and all that?
That's a good question. So I originally was a music major. I wanted to be Dr. Dre. I wanted to be a music producer.
Okay.
All right. So when I went to Hampton, that was another reason why I picked Hampton. They have a musical engineering degree.
Yeah.
So that was the only school that I knew that had it, so I went there. Then I got kicked out of that, but then I said I want to still be in music. Well, the music program at Smith was not accredited. And there was issues about that, and they're like, "Well, son, you're not taking any music classes. You ain't even playing on the right mouthpiece. Like, you might need to reconsider if you want to still be a music major." So in part, that was part of the decision as well, to be a music major there at Jackson State. And I lasted about like 2 months, because music theory just dismantled everything in my head. Like, it just broke me down. And I then switched to history after my midterms of my freshman year at Jackson State. I switched to history. And I stayed with that, and then I ended up finishing Jackson State with a BA in history.
Okay. So now let's talk about Jackson State, your time at Jackson State. Tell me some of, give me a couple of things that stick out to you, like your memories, your best memories, whether they were good or bad, or, just your experience
Well,
there.
I remember just being scared. Like it was pretty intimidating because you were meeting like a lot of really, really good trumpet players, and then it was a lot of, the upperclassmen and, the freshmen. So you were worried, with all the upperclassmen running around,
Right.
I do remember that our class, the 11 of us trumpet players that came in together, they all kind of like helped me grow up a little bit. Like each one of them had like a different story. But my friend Avery McFadden, he was the best one out of all of us. He's from Marion, South Carolina. He actually helped me to start studying because we would party all night and we was doing a whole bunch of stuff. And then I remember he had like a 3-point grade point average or something. And I was like, how are you able to do all and then still, So I was around some good people that were going somewhere. And it kind of cleaned me up while I was there. And then I started to practice my horn more because I then understood, who was a good trumpet player and what you needed to do. You needed to know all your scales and, you needed to know all the basics. So when me being in that environment, it cleaned up a lot of things for me. So that's one thing I appreciate the music program because it was like a grown man program. It wasn't just about the boom. It really was churning out some leaders in our society.
Right, right.
So it made me a better student, number one. Number two, probably the biggest thing is when Southern played on us. Somebody finally put it on Facebook, and I told the Show Style Talk guys, but we marched into Jackson in 97, and Southern got there early, and they waited on us to get in front of them. We always play Get Ready, marching in the stadium, and they waited for the piccolo solo, which is like the softest part of the song. And they played Hey in the middle of the barn, like right when we started, like right when we were there in front of them. And I remember, the biggest thing I remember about that, Christy, was we were all surprised. Everybody got off step because we were surprised. We totally weren't expecting that. But I remember WT, War and Thunder, like they said, like their hands were bleeding when they got in the stands because they were beating their drums so hard. They were playing series so hard just to hear us over Southern.
Right.
Two things Southern didn't know. They didn't know that when they have their bells up, more of the sound is traveling across the stadium. So they weren't like pointing their bells in our faces. It looked like way worse than what it was on the other side of the field.
Right, right.
So there, it was quiet enough for us to kind of like get it back together, but it was definitely a bonding experience because we were upset when we got in the stands. We wanted, like, people wanted to fight, like people wanted, like it was off the chain. It made the game really good though. You know what I mean? Because people were so hyped that the band did that, and I remember that. But then I remember they left immediately after the game, Christy. Like they were putting their hats on like 5 minutes left in the game, and as soon as the game was over, they dipped. And we was upset, like, why y'all do that? Yeah, they knew. So I remember that. That's probably my favorite memory of all time, probably in the band, because it was crazy. It really was.
Well, I've been to a Boombox Classic, and that was a memorable experience. And I went when it was in Jackson too, because like it's better when you go in Jackson rather than when it's in Baton Rouge. So. Yeah,
because people get scared. Another story about that, the following year when we went to Baton Rouge, my God, Christy, we were on the bus, and then they were like, don't get off the bus. It's a bomb threat. And then we were like, oh, my God. And then they're like, and then like we would go somewhere else, and then somebody would get on the bus and be like, everybody get down on the floor. Everybody get down, hit the floor. They're like, we trying to get, and we was like, what is going on? And it was like a scare everywhere we went. We then got to the game. People were yelling at us. They were jeering us. When we were trying to march in the stands, they were throwing bottles in the stands. So, like, we would have to, like, move the glass out of the way to sit down. Oh, my God. It was horrible. and the J sets actually fell out. Either the director or there was some issue, and the J sets went on protest that game. So instead of marching, they showed up at the game in like this Jackson State J set like T-shirts, and they were like sitting in front of the band just cheering, just be totally ornery about the situation. So
wow.
So yeah, it was a lot of drama going on, and then we had a freshman girl who was a baton twirler, so we had to feature her at the last minute. And then the song that she wanted, we didn't really know it. The bass drummer who normally counted off the Tiger Run On, he got in trouble, and he wasn't there. A freshman had to do it, and the freshman messed up Tiger Run On.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, it was one of the worst days ever. And when you look at the tape, it just looks like we were, like, totally a subpar band. We looked so bad on tape. And so it's like, man, why were they even – man, we looked horrible.
Now, you know I got to look up, I got to find that. I'm sure it's somewhere online.
Yeah, the halftime show that Jackson State did, it was bad, let me tell you. We got it together at the end, but for some reason, Southern didn't stick around. They played one song, and they left. We were like, what's going on? So we played a little bit. We felt a little bit better about ourselves after the game. But then once we broke and started marching to the bus, people started throwing stuff at us, and then we kind of had to break out of formation and just get on the bus, and just go home. It was a bad day. You know what I'm saying?
Wow.
It was.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a bad day.
Other than Southern, who were your favorite bands to face against, or did you have a favorite band that you like to face against? Sure, I'm sure Southern was one of them just because of the rivalry, but
yeah, Southern. We played against Florida A&M in '98, and I really enjoyed that. It was special because Doc had threw a lot of people out of the band that year. My freshman year, '97, we were like a powerhouse band. We had the numbers, we had everything. But then Doc, he threw a lot of people out because there was a lot of knuckleheads up in there, So we were small when we played against FAM. But then that night we went to their hotel, and that's all they talked about. They was like, damn, y'all sounded good. Like, your upper brass, blah, blah, blah. Like, and we were surprised because, we didn't think we were that good, because we had lost so many people. So that gave us some confidence. Texas Southern was always good because they were small, but they were like loud. Like they would run with us for a while, you know what I mean? So they were challenging.
I remember that Texas Southern. Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, they were good. So those two I remember. Of course, Southern, but then the Alcorn game is most important because the freshmen cross into the band at the end, so that's special. And Alcorn, they're like, little brother Jackson State anyway. So, you always want to try to make sure that you do better than them because they're always trying to shake that little brother image. They always trying to break out free and say, hey, we're the better program. So they were always competitive. So yeah, Alcorn probably, but yeah, probably most looking forward to it was probably Southern. Tennessee State was a good test because it was always early in the year, but Tennessee State always had a lot of songs. So when we would battle with them in Memphis, it was a good test to see like how big our book is and how well the book is. Because one year we ran out of songs, and in '97, it was that first year, '97. We were really good, but we hadn't practiced that many songs. So after the game, I remember we went to the fifth quarter with them, and we ran out of songs. Like, and they were just over there cooking. They were just over there playing everything. You know what I'm saying? And and we just had to leave. That was it.
Yeah. So let's talk about the Marching Podcast. Okay. So tell me about how you began with the Marching Podcast, and talk about that.
So I moved out here to California in 2006, this is really just kind of catapulted my career. And moving to California, I had never been this far west before, so I was excited just because it was California. But when I got here, I noticed that there ain't too many black people out here. Like we see Menace to Society, we see Boys and Hoods. Well, those are certain pockets of California. Oakland, you got like your major cities, but across the whole, it's very different from us black folks in the South. Whereas in North Carolina, you might have an entire black county, or you might have an entire stretch of a black neighborhood. The per capita black folks, it's not like that. So it's a lot of pockets of people. Where I am, I'm an hour from downtown LA, like on the way to Palm Springs, and there are not as many black people out here. So when I settled, I'm all HBCU'd out. That was the biggest thing that I noticed, that young black people here, they didn't have BET like I did, marching in front of the TV, where I just knew I was going to college. Like they don't have that here. It's in sports. There are a lot of people that play sports, so they say, I'm gonna go play sports. But us HBCUs back south, there's a pride element. And I think it plays a difference when, as you grow into an adult, you say, I want to be a part of that. I wanted to bring that here to California. And I wanted to make black people out here aware about black schools, students, to say, hey, when you weigh your college, at least maybe consider a black school. What my first thing I wanted to do was I wanted to have like a music school. So like I would say, okay, maybe I'll start practicing my trumpet again, and I'll pick up lessons from people, and I'll try to develop like a band, or I'll do something like that. And then I met a guy who developed a music school, the head director at Pacific Press, the DCI company out here. Stuart Pompel is his name. I talked to him, and he was like, yeah, brother, what exactly are you trying to do? And I was like, man, I don't know. So I actually chopped it up with him, and he actually sat down and gave me, and when I say chop it up, I'm not talking about the podcast yet, but I actually sat down and talked to him, and he gave me a list of things that I needed and things I should weigh as far as creating a music school. And when I talked to him, that's when I realized I don't want to create a music school. So I then said, what else can I do? How else can I give back? And then I decided to come up with a blog. And that's when I started the blog that I have now, the marchingblogcast.com. And it was originally just supposed to be like information about black colleges. Well, I met a guy, Jared Carter Sr., and he is the founder of HBCU Digest. Yeah. He went to Bowie State. He was on Twitter, and he had a show on Blog Talk Radio. And he would go on Blog Talk Radio, and he would do his show talking about black colleges. I called him. I was like, dog, this is awesome. This is like, well, how do you? And I talked to him, and next thing you know, I signed up on Blog Talk Radio, and I tried to, and that's essentially how it started. So the blog started on September 11th, 2011. So I used that as my founding day for the Marching Podcast. And then May 21st, the following spring, which is my mother's birthday, 2012, is when I started using Blog Talk Radio to do the Marching Podcast. And my first couple of episodes were like more discussion, and like getting it out there, like, hey, A&T played this school or so-and-so, and it was like discussion. And then from there, I just kind of wanted to get the word out so more people out here would just know about black colleges. And then the second thing, the very next person that came along was someone called Christy Walker.
Oh, gosh.
I started researching HBCU Band Radio, HBCU Band Podcast. And the fifthquarter.com podcast showed up. And I was like, hey, that's the blog, that's the forum thing, because I was on it, but like I didn't know who you were, and I didn't make the association that that's what the podcast was. So I started listening to your show, and I listened to like all of your show because me being an engineer, a lot of what I do is like simulating tests. So a lot of time I can just sit and listen to radio or listen to podcasts. I listened to like all of your podcasts. And then I said, okay, I'm going to proceed forward with this format for my show. Okay. And then I'm going to reach out and try to meet Christy to see if she was going to be on the show or if I could do an interview with her. So that's how really things got rolling. Once I heard your show and I got like an idea of what I wanted to do, then I kind of ran with it after that. And I met Rashad. Okay. I think I did the show, and Rashad called in. And then I met him, and then he said, well, hey, you know, I got the fruit analysis. I'm prune juice on the fifth quarter. You know, I would like to start doing that, you know. So then we got together, and, you know, the rest is history, as they say.
Yeah, yeah. So, okay, I have learned so much about you on this. I mean, you know, we've known each other all these years, but it's like, you know, there are some things that I didn't know, which is great. So, yeah. Okay. So tell me, you know, with the Marching Podcast and you know, just tell me some of the highlights of it. Like, what are some of the things that you've accomplished with the Marching Podcast?
Well, I've given some students some money. That's like my biggest thing. I am, however, walking the line of profit and like just giving back because I enjoy paying a tithe, if you will, like when I pay for my website and when I pay for all of the things to do this whole Marching Podcast. I feel good because I'm paying for it. You know what I'm saying? Okay, so the Marching Podcast consists of 4 shows. Okay, the 90-degree show is like Sports Center, and that's when we talk about one of the band competitions from the weekend. The Director Series is when I focus on a director, and maybe it might have a book, or they may have like a seminar that we want to focus on, and I'll do like a 3 or 4 part series featuring that director and their expertise. We have Chopping It Up, which is just the basic interview show, which is similar to what we're doing. And then we have National Signing Day. And National Signing Day for marching bands is when we highlight students in the 12th grade going to march somewhere next year. And they get to tell us where they're going to march, very similar to the athletes do with football, athletes do with basketball, and they say, hey, you know, I'm going to Duke. And then they put the Duke hat on or something like that. Well, we're doing the same thing now to focus the kids, but also focus and blow up the school some. So, but that's been probably the most rewarding, where I focus and we get the student to say what they're doing, where they're going, so the world sees more positive influence of these young black kids saying that they're going somewhere other than, you know, athletics. Or they're picking a school other than something than, you know, hey, I want to go play for Nick Saban so I can make the league and buy my mama a house. You know what I'm saying? Trying to focus on something other than that.
Well, we are going to go ahead and wrap up this interview, but I wanted to ask you if you had any like parting advice or parting words or anything that you want to get across about your experience marching at the 2 schools where you marched, or, you know, if you have anything else you'd like to add.
Go to class. That is my motto. I say the same thing to the students that finish National Signing Day. I was so enamored with the band that I wasn't tripping off getting my education, and that stymied a lot of things. Now, it's good to love the band and want to be part of the band, but at the same time, know that you're going to college, you know, so you can't have the band without going to school. And I love, Christy, let me tell you something. I love when I was at Jack, and I did it at Smith too, but I thought that I was like a professional athlete. In the delusion of my mind, I was like, I'm going to get up, kick it with my friends. I'm going to go to the calf, and then I'll probably take a shower maybe, and then I show up for band practice. Like my day centered around band practice at 6 o'clock, whereas I try to tell people now don't let that happen. Because when I showed up at the spring semester, like I saw I had a 1.23 grade point average, and I spent the rest of my time making up for it. You know, I wanted to pledge when I was at Jackson State. There was a lot of stuff I wanted to do there at Jackson State, and I couldn't do it because I was petitioning my classes. You know, so I finally, in the end, I finished with a 3.0. But I promise you, there was probably a good year. I just literally took classes over. Like, I petitioned them. So I wasted a lot of time. So, yes, that's my parting advice. Go to class.
All right, Joe. That's some great advice. So glad you were able to talk with me. This was a lot of fun. And, so thanks for just being you. And, we'll be listening for the next marching podcast. So it was good talking to you.
It's good talking to you as well, and I'm honored. Like I said, it's been really nice meeting you, and I really appreciate all the things you're doing as well. It's made a difference in my life, so thank you to you.
You have listened to the HBCU Band Experience with Christy Walker. Interviews and editing conducted by yours truly, Dr. Christy Walker. The music is District 4 by Kevin MacLeod, and you can find this podcast on HBCUbandexperience.podbean.com. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever else you get your podcasts. Take care.